But why does this philosophy feel so different, so healing in a world like ours? Because we are not just overwhelmed by things, we are overwhelmed by speed, by noise, by the relentless pace of modern life that demands we do more, achieve more, and never stop moving. Anxiety becomes the background hum we've learned to live with. It's the unease we feel scrolling endlessly, the tightness in our chest when we can't switch off, the exhaustion that lingers no matter how much we rest. And yet, we wonder why peace feels so out of reach. What if that peace was never meant to be chased but remembered? What if the stillness we crave isn't found in another productivity hack, another self-help trend, or another shiny distraction, but in something much older, something timeless, something deeply human? This is where ancient Japanese philosophy offers more than just advice. It offers an antidote, a quiet rebellion against chaos. At the heart of Japanese minimalism lies a profound spiritual wisdom that many have forgotten in the noise of modernity. Concepts like wabi-sabi teach us to embrace imperfection, to see beauty in the worn, the weathered, the incomplete. Instead of chasing flawless success, we are invited to accept life as it is messy, fragile, fleeting, and in doing so, we soften, we breathe, we allow ourselves to just be. Another essential idea is the sacred pause, the space between things. In Western culture, silence is often seen as emptiness, as awkward. But in Japanese philosophy, silence is rich. It's where meaning lives. The empty space in a room isn't what's missing, it's what holds everything together. When you give yourself permission to slow down, to do less, to not fill every moment with stimulation, you begin to feel something unexpected: relief. In that quiet, anxiety begins to loosen its grip. This is not just theory, it's a lived experience. In a Japanese home guided by these principles, you notice the absence of clutter, but more importantly, the presence of intention. A single flower placed just so, a cup of tea poured without rush, a window framing the morning light. These aren't aesthetic choices, they're emotional invitations. They say, you're safe here. You don't need to prove anything. You are enough. Modern anxiety thrives on fragmentation, our attention pulled in 1,000 directions, our identities fractured across roles and screens. Japanese minimalism, with its roots in Zen, gently gathers those pieces and brings them back into wholeness. Through simplicity, we return to our senses. Through stillness, we return to ourselves. This ancient philosophy doesn't ask you to escape your life, it asks you to enter it more fully, to touch it with reverence, to create space not just in your home, but in your heart, so that anxiety no longer runs the show, and instead, you begin to feel anchored, present, alive. In the rest of this video, we'll explore how to begin integrating these ideas into your everyday life, not with drastic changes, but with small, sacred shifts. Whether you're feeling burnt out, lost, or just tired of the noise, there is a different way to live. And perhaps that ancient way is exactly what your modern soul has been waiting for. In a culture where stress is normalized and overworking is worn like a badge of honor, Japanese minimalism offers more than just aesthetic calm. It offers a profound psychological reset. It whispers a radically different message. You don't have to carry everything. Not in your hands, not in your home, and not in your heart. In a society that glorifies hustle and endless striving, letting go feels like rebellion. But it's the kind of rebellion that heals. This ancient philosophy invites you to release not only clutter, but also the expectations that clutter your mind. It's a gentle, conscious return to balance. When you begin removing what no longer aligns with your values, you're not just making space physically, you're making space emotionally. You begin to notice the difference between what drains you and what restores you. You realize how much of your anxiety has been rooted in trying to maintain things you never needed in the first place. In a Japanese minimalist space, stillness is not just allowed, it is honored. The empty spaces aren't accidental, they're intentional. They give your eyes a place to rest, your mind a chance to breathe, and your nervous system a rare moment of pause. Even the smallest objects like a single flower in a vase or the sound of a wind chime in the breeze carry meaning. They aren't loud, but they speak to something deep inside us. They remind us that peace is not something we chase, it's something we create, moment by quiet moment. And when simplicity becomes your lifestyle, something beautiful begins to shift. You no longer equate productivity with self-worth. You begin to measure your day not by how much you did, but by how deeply you lived. You create rituals instead of routines, moments that nourish instead of deplete. Drinking tea becomes meditation. Folding clothes becomes gratitude. Walking through your home becomes a grounding experience, not just a pathway from task to task. Minimalism, at its core, is not about absence, it's about presence. It's the clarity that emerges when distractions fall away. It's the inner spaciousness that grows when you are no longer burdened by excess, whether material or emotional. The principles of wabi-sabi and ma help you release the impossible ideal of perfection and embrace the grace of what is. A chipped mug you love, a quiet morning without noise, a life that unfolds in its own rhythm. Letting go then becomes an act of power, not of loss, but of reclamation. You reclaim your time, your energy, your peace. You stop living on autopilot and begin living with intent. And in doing so, anxiety no longer owns you. It softens, it quiets, it loses its grip because you are no longer racing towards something outside of yourself. You are already home, in every sense of the word. This is the hidden power of Japanese minimalism. It doesn't just tidy your space, it clears the static from your soul. And through that clarity, it gives you the rarest gift of all, the ability to feel calm in a world that never stops moving. And the beauty of this philosophy is that its benefits ripple outward far beyond your physical space. When you clear the noise from your surroundings, you begin to clear the static from your relationships. Without the constant pull of distractions or the burden of keeping up with material demands, you start to show up differently with more presence, more attention, more heart. You listen more deeply, you connect more fully. The energy that was once spent organizing, cleaning, or managing excess is now free to be invested in moments that truly matter. Shared laughter, quiet conversations, the comfort of simply being together. In choosing less, you give more of yourself to the people you love. And in that exchange, you gain something immeasurable: emotional spaciousness, peace of mind, a sense of wholeness that no purchase could ever offer. Japanese minimalism, then, is not just a home design philosophy. It's a wellness practice, a quiet, powerful remedy for the emotional dissonance of modern life. By shaping your environment with intention, you begin to shape your inner world. Simplicity on the outside creates stillness on the inside. A clean, open room becomes more than a visual relief, it becomes a sanctuary. A space where your nervous system can relax, where your thoughts can slow, where you can finally exhale. Science confirms what this philosophy has known for centuries, that cluttered environments fuel mental overload and anxiety. But when your home reflects clarity, your mind follows. This way of living also reawakens your connection to the natural world, an element deeply embedded in Japanese aesthetics and known as shizen. When you invite nature indoors through wood, stone, water, light, and greenery, you invite in something older than stress, something wiser than technology. These natural materials don't just decorate a room, they restore your balance. They remind you of your roots. They remind you to ground, to soften, to live in rhythm with the seasons instead of racing against time. And in doing so, you create a healthier life, not only emotionally, but physically. Fewer objects mean fewer allergens, less dust, and more space for air and light. The focus on craftsmanship and sustainable materials ensures that what you do bring into your space supports your health, not undermines it. But perhaps the most lasting benefit is psychological. Japanese minimalism nurtures mindfulness not as a trendy buzzword, but as a way of being. When your space is quiet, your actions become more deliberate. Pouring tea becomes a ceremony. Washing your face becomes an act of care. Arranging a single flower becomes a way of saying, "I'm here. This moment matters." Over time, this way of living transforms the way you experience life itself. You begin to notice details. You become more patient, more focused, more grounded in who you are. Your routines shift from automatic to intentional, from hurried to sacred. You stop racing through your life and start inhabiting it. That's the quiet magic of Japanese minimalism. It doesn't promise you a perfect life, but it does offer you a real one. A life where you're not constantly chasing peace, because you've already created it. A life where you are no longer overwhelmed by your surroundings, but nourished by them. Where each object, each breath, Each moment becomes a chance to come home to yourself. And the most beautiful part? You don't need to change everything overnight. This philosophy welcomes small, thoughtful steps. You can begin today with one drawer, one shelf, one simple pause. Walk into the room where you begin and end your day. Look around. Does it make you feel calm or crowded? Ask yourself not what you should get rid of, but what you want to keep. What supports your peace? What feels aligned with your values? That's where the shift begins, not with perfection, but with presence. And from there, slowly and steadily, you start to craft a life that no longer fuels your anxiety, but gently, intentionally, begins to heal it. If you're wondering how to begin applying these ideas in your everyday life, the answer is simpler than you think. Japanese minimalism isn't about deprivation, it's about devotion. A quiet devotion to purpose, to beauty, and to peace. And that begins with intentional functionality. In this philosophy, every object you keep should earn its place not through cost or status, but through meaning and usefulness. A low wooden table isn't just furniture, it's a centerpiece of flexibility. It can be where you eat, where you write, where you think. Multifunctional pieces like this don't just save space, they reduce decision fatigue. They create harmony between action and environment, making your home feel like an extension of your values rather than a collection of things. Then, look to nature not as decoration, but as grounding medicine. Invite in the warmth of bamboo, the gentle stillness of stone, or the quiet vitality of a single bonsai by the window. Use neutral tones that mirror the forest floor or the morning sky. These aren't design tricks, they're a reconnection. They remind your body what peace feels like. They bring you back to earth literally and emotionally, offering a sense of rootedness that technology can't replicate. This is the Shizen principle, living in sync with the rhythms of nature rather than constantly resisting them. And just as important as what you add is what you leave empty. The concept of sacred space, teaches that emptiness isn't absence, it's presence in its purest form. The spaces between objects, the pauses between moments, these are what give life its rhythm. Instead of filling every shelf, every wall, every calendar slot, let yourself practice restraint. Let your eyes and your mind rest. This silence, this stillness, becomes a kind of quiet power, a space where clarity can emerge. Decluttering, then, is no longer a chore. It becomes a ritual of realignment. Don't ask what to throw away. Ask instead, what supports the life I want to live? What feels aligned with the person I am becoming? Each decision becomes an act of self-inquiry, an invitation to rediscover your values not in theory, but through action. This process isn't about minimalism as a look, it's about minimalism as a mirror. You begin to see yourself more clearly in the reflection of what you choose to keep close. From there, the simplicity spreads into your routines. Japanese minimalism isn't confined to walls or shelves, it touches the way you move through time. Consider how you start your morning. Is it chaotic, fragmented, reactive? Or can it be gentle, intentional, sacred? What if instead of checking your phone, you checked in with your breath? What if brushing your teeth became a moment of gratitude? Or making your bed became an offering to peace? These small shifts change more than your habits, they change your presence. And with time, a ripple effect begins. Your days feel lighter, your choices feel clearer, your energy feels more focused. You begin to notice how much anxiety dissolves when your life feels aligned. Because Japanese minimalism, at its core, is more than just a design principle, it is a spiritual way of being. A lived philosophy that honors simplicity not as lack, but as wisdom. It sees beauty in imperfection, reverence in routine, and power in stillness. This is where wabi-sabi enters an ancient lens that gently reminds us, nothing is perfect, nothing lasts, and that's okay. The chipped teacup, the uneven grain in the wood, the aging fabric on your favorite chair, these aren't flaws, they're stories. They're evidence of time, of use, of life. And when we learn to see beauty in what is weathered, we begin to see it in ourselves, in our stretch marks, our scars, our mistakes. We stop chasing some polished version of peace and instead welcome what's real. We soften toward our anxiety instead of fighting it. We understand that our cracks aren't broken, they're where the light gets in. So when you practice this form of minimalism, you're not just changing your space, you're changing your relationship with control, with perfection, with pressure. You're learning to let go not just of objects, but of who you thought you had to be. And in that letting go, you begin to heal. At the heart of Japanese minimalism lies a spiritual undercurrent that quietly transforms how you experience the world. It begins with presence. Mindfulness isn't a technique reserved for meditation cushions. It's a way of living that touches every corner of your day. And through minimalism, this presence becomes easier to access. By clearing the noise, physical, digital, emotional, you give your attention a place to land. You begin to notice the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the sound of silence between thoughts, the peace that was always there beneath the clutter. Every task becomes an opportunity to return to yourself. Washing a bowl, tying your shoes, sharing a meal. These simple acts, once rushed or ignored, become sacred. And in that slowness, anxiety softens. It has nowhere to hide in the present moment. Zen Buddhism. One of the deep roots of this philosophy teaches that peace isn't found in perfection or control, but in surrender, in stillness, in simplicity. The Zen garden, with its raked sand and carefully placed stones, is more than a visual metaphor. It's a reflection of the mind itself, calm, intentional, uncluttered. Each element exists in harmony with the whole. Nothing screams for attention. Nothing is there without reason. When your life mirrors this, when you begin to arrange your days with the same quiet care, you start to feel less like you're surviving, and more like you're simply being. That's the medicine minimalism offers. Not a fix, but a shift. Not an escape, but a return. And it's a return not only to peace, but to purpose. A spiritually aligned space doesn't just look beautiful, it feels nourishing. It grounds you in who you are. It whispers the truth that you don't need more to be more. That what you already have, when seen clearly and used mindfully, can be enough. This is where the principle of Yono-bi, or the beauty of practical objects, comes alive. A wooden spoon, a clay cup, a soft cloth. These aren't just things, they're anchors to the moment. They slow you down, they invite gratitude. A tea set becomes more than a vessel, it becomes a ritual, a pause, a quiet breath in a busy world. The function is the form, the utility is the poetry. This way of living reorients your attention. Instead of scanning for what's missing, you start seeing what's already here. And when you no longer chase after the next distraction, you reclaim the most precious resource you have, time. Decision fatigue fades, mental clutter dissolves. Your energy stops scattering in a dozen directions and begins to focus on what really matters: relationships, creativity, presence, peace. Minimalism, in this sense, becomes a kind of inner economy. You spend less emotionally, mentally, spiritually, so you can live more intentionally, more openly, more awake. It's not about perfection, it's about alignment. And alignment is where anxiety loses its grip, because when your outer world reflects your inner values, there's less conflict, less chaos, less tension between who you are and how you live. You stop performing, you stop rushing, you stop proving. Instead, you begin inhabiting your life with quiet authority. You begin choosing your moments with care. You learn that a slow morning with intention is more valuable than a full day lived on autopilot. Japanese minimalism doesn't demand a rigid lifestyle. It offers a soft invitation to move more slowly, to choose more wisely, to feel more deeply, to be here, really here, for your one and only life. And in that presence, perhaps for the first time in a long time, you remember what it feels like to be calm. There is also a quiet, yet powerful environmental truth embedded in Japanese minimalism: sustainability. This philosophy doesn't just nourish your soul, it respects the world around you. In a culture driven by endless production and fast consumption, minimalism slows the cycle. It invites you to pause before purchasing, to choose quality over quantity, and to ask, do I truly need this? Is it made to last? Will it serve a meaningful purpose in my life? These simple questions shift you from a consumer to a curator. You begin to gather not just things, but values. Fewer possessions mean fewer resources wasted, less pollution, less clutter in landfills and in your mind. It's an act of care for the planet, for your community, and for yourself. And through that shift, something deeper begins to unfold, a sense of peace. Not just because your space is cleaner or your schedule lighter, but because your life begins to feel coherent. Each choice becomes a thread in a larger tapestry, one woven with purpose, not pressure. You begin to live in a way that reflects your ideals, not your impulses. There's a quiet integrity that forms when your external world aligns with your internal compass. You're no longer pulled in every direction. You begin to center. And in that center, anxiety loses its power. Minimalism, in its truest form, is not about owning less. It's about feeling more clarity, more balance, more connection. The chaos outside begins to settle because the chaos inside is being addressed. A minimalist home becomes more than a design goal. It becomes a sanctuary for your nervous system. The fewer distractions there are around you, the easier it is to find stillness within you. You are no longer living in reaction. You're living in reflection. This philosophy calls you to return, not to something trendy or aesthetic, but to something ancient and essential. In Japanese culture, the idea of weo, or harmony, is foundational. Harmony between people, between nature and structure, between mind and matter. When your physical environment is harmonious, your thoughts begin to mirror that. And in a world where stress is often treated with more activity, more distraction, more noise, this return to simplicity is nothing short of revolutionary. In letting go of excess, you regain something priceless, your presence. You begin to realize that joy isn't found in the next achievement or possession. It's in the quiet moments already around you. Drinking tea without checking your phone, walking without rushing, breathing without needing to be anywhere else. These moments, though small, become sacred. They are where healing happens not loudly, but slowly, consistently, and deeply. Japanese minimalism gently reminds us that a meaningful life isn't built on more, but on enough. That peace isn't a place we arrive at. It's something we create, one decision, one space, one breath at a time. And perhaps in that stillness, we finally realize we were never broken. We were just buried under noise, under pressure, under things that never truly mattered. Strip them away, and what remains is not emptiness, but truth. Not lack, but lightness. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you've always been, before the world told you to be everything else. And in that return, in that quiet reclamation of self, you may find the very thing modern life has stolen from you: peace of mind. One of the most beautiful gifts of Japanese minimalism is the way it reshapes your relationships. When your life is no longer centered around maintaining, acquiring, or organizing material things, you suddenly find yourself with something far more valuable: time, attention, emotional energy. You start showing up more fully for your partner, your family, your friends. Conversations deepen, distractions fade, and shared moments feel more sacred. It's as if by clearing your space, you clear the emotional static that often keeps us distant. You become more available, not just physically, but emotionally. And in that presence, intimacy blooms. Japanese minimalism reminds us that true wealth is found not in things, but in connection. That fulfillment doesn't come from what's stored on shelves, but from the bonds we nurture day by day. Simplicity, in this sense, is not a limitation, it's a gateway. A way of removing what's shallow to make space for what's real. A way of saying, this matters more. Because when the noise dies down, what remains is often love, and that, more than anything, is what heals. But perhaps the most profound benefit of all is purpose. Minimalism invites you to ask not only what you want to own, but how you want to live. What do you value? What do you stand for? What legacy are you shaping in the quiet, ordinary choices of your daily life? As you let go of the unnecessary, what remains begins to tell a story, your story. One that's aligned, intentional, and free from the chaos of trying to keep up with a world that never stops asking for more. And yet, it's not always easy. We live in a society that constantly rewards accumulation. From social media to storefronts, we are fed a narrative that more is better, faster is smarter, and busier is more valuable. The idea of choosing less in that environment feels countercultural, almost rebellious. But maybe that's the point. Maybe rebellion looks less like shouting and more like pausing, less like achieving, more like being. Minimalism dares you to slow down in a world that only knows how to speed up. And that slowness is where healing begins. Still, the path isn't without its challenges. Letting go often stirs discomfort. Old memories surface. Guilt clings. Fear whispers, "What if you need this someday?" And yet, what if you don't? What if holding on is the very thing keeping you from peace? Japanese minimalism doesn't ask you to discard everything you love. It simply asks you to look closer, to ask whether that item, that memory, that belief still supports the person you're becoming, and if not, to release it with gratitude, not regret. Letting go is not about erasing the past. It's about making room for the future. It's about choosing presence over possession, clarity over clutter, meaning over maintenance. And when you make that choice again and again, you begin to live not reactively, but responsively. Your life becomes less about surviving the noise, and more about cultivating the stillness. And yes, there will be days when you falter, when you accumulate out of habit, or cling to what once brought comfort. That's okay. Japanese minimalism isn't perfection, it's practice, a gentle return, a compassionate recalibration. You don't have to live in a sparse, spotless space to embody this philosophy. You simply have to live with intention, to align your outer environment with your inner truth, to create a home and a life that feels like it was made for you, not for appearances. Because in the end, this isn't about having less for the sake of it. It's about living more fully, more freely, more peacefully. And in a world that measures success in likes, dollars, and square footage, choosing that kind of life is the most radical act of self-care you can make. It's easy to assume that minimalism means giving up comfort, that living with less must feel cold, sparse, or even restrictive. But Japanese minimalism was never about deprivation. It's about refinement. It's about designing a space in a life that feels essential, not empty. That holds only what truly supports you. A soft cushion placed with care, a warm light filtering through linen curtains, a single chair that's both beautiful and deeply comfortable. These small choices remind us that simplicity isn't the absence of comfort. It's the deep presence of what matters most. Form and function aren't in conflict. Here they support each other, like breath and stillness. When we remove the excess, we don't lose joy, we uncover it. We don't eliminate beauty, we highlight it. And in this balance, we find the one thing we've been searching for all along: peace. Not the fleeting kind you get from a distraction or a dopamine hit, but the grounded, nourishing kind that comes from living in alignment. When your environment, your choices, and your values are in harmony, your nervous system can finally relax. Your attention can finally land. And your spirit can finally rest. Yes, it takes time. Yes, it takes intention. But the reward is a life that feels like yours, not one shaped by algorithms or advertisements, but by clarity, by meaning, by the quiet courage to say no to what doesn't serve you, and yes to what does. The deeper you walk this path, the more you realize. This isn't about your stuff. It's about your story, who you're becoming, what you're choosing to carry forward, and what you're finally willing to lay down. Japanese minimalism is more than a style. It's a way of seeing, a way of being. It invites you to live with presence, not pressure, with care, not clutter, with enough, not excess. And in that shift from consumer to creator, from distracted to intentional, you begin to write a new chapter. One where life isn't measured by how much you own, but by how deeply you feel, how fully you show up, how often you come home to yourself. So, ask yourself gently, what in your life no longer reflects who you are becoming? What can you release to create space for peace? This isn't a one-time purge. It's a quiet, ongoing practice, a return, a remembering, a reclaiming of the simplicity that already lives inside you. And in the end, that's the great paradox. When you live with less, you don't lose, you gain. More clarity, more connection, more calm, more of what makes life worth living. Because peace doesn't come from adding more, it comes from removing what was never needed. The journey isn't easy, but it's worth it. Not because it changes the world outside you, but because it changes the way you move through it, with grace, with breath, with intention. And in that space, quiet, grounded, whole, you'll discover what Japanese wisdom has known all along. You don't need more to feel complete. You just need less of what was never you to begin with.